welcome to the 559th episode of Travel Witch Radio. I'm Dan Schlossberg. Roger Noriega is not with us tonight, but we are in the 13th season of Travel Witch Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from your armchair, the comfort of your armchair, actually. Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rental companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitalities, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. If it's got anything to do with travel, it's got everything to do with Travel Witch Radio. Our guest today is Jennifer Lemmer-Posey, Tribals Curator of Circus in Sarasota, Florida. Welcome, Jen, to Travel Witch Radio.
Dan, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
And I do hope I pronounced it correctly. Is it Tibbles?
Tibbles, that's right.
Tibbles, okay. Like there was a Star Trek episode once called The Trouble with Tibbles, I believe.
Oh, those were Tribbles. There was an R in that one.
Okay, pretty close. So the R is mine. Okay. Most of our viewers know about the Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus, but isn't it now called the greatest show on earth?
Well, it's actually always been called the greatest show on earth. So that title, the greatest show on earth, started with P.T. Barnum in 1871 and traveled with every circus that had his name in the title. So when Ringling Brothers combined their show with the Barnum and Bailey show in 1919, they adopted that wonderful title that anybody in the circus business would love to have, of the greatest show on earth.
What is the history of the circus? Wasn't George Washington a big fan?
Yeah, so circus is really interesting in terms of performance arts because it's one of the few that we can really look back and see a full history. When we talk about the modern circus being a performance in at least one, if not more, rings and involving various types of acts, that starts in 1768 outside of London. And it comes here to the States right away. By 1793, there are circus performances happening in Philadelphia, right there at the seat of the government, right, as our nation is starting. And George Washington was a fan. We know that he went to see John Bill Ricketts' circus, which in that era was really based on equestrian acts. That was a lot of the program, was people performing amazing feats on horseback. And so Washington went to see the circus, and eventually he even sold his horse to John Bill Ricketts.
When did Ringling Brothers begin, and when did they team up with Barnum and Bailey?
So the Ringling Brothers began their own circus in 1884, and they traveled really in the Midwest. Their territory was Chicago and west of the Mississippi. The Barnum and Bailey dominated the East Coast region. And so the brothers slowly grew their show. And then right around the turn of the century in 1903, actually, I'm sorry, 1897 was when James Bailey took the Barnum and Bailey Circus to Europe until 1903. And in that time, the brothers grew their route. And by the time Bailey came back from Europe, the Ringlings were right there on center stage, and they started a partnership. They bought out the Barnum and Bailey title in 1907 when James Bailey died, toured those two circuses, Barnum and Bailey and Ringling Brothers, separately until 1919 when they merged them together in one big mega show.
Isn't that P.T. Barnum we're talking about? And how much did the Hugh Jackman movie help?
Yeah, P.T. Barnum. So P.T. Barnum wasn't Hugh Jackman, although the movie makes you think that. So P.T. Barnum was this amazing character. He entered the circus business later in life. We like to refer to it as his retirement project because he really was interested first in the American Museum. He began showing all kinds of natural history curiosities and performers and other things at his museum in New York, and then ventured into the performing business with the circus. And I always like to tell people P.T. Barnum really was a fan of attention, of advertising in any form. So I'm pretty sure he would have loved that Hugh Jackman portrayed him, and he would have loved even more how popular that movie, The Greatest Showman, has become. It's not the greatest specific history of P.T. Barnum, but it puts a good spectacle on.
I remember the circus touring under giant canvas tents, but didn't it move to arenas?
Yeah. Yeah, so the circus in America started out actually in the very early days. Washington would have seen it in a building. It started in buildings and then moved into tents that could move around 1820s. And by the 1880s, we see the three-ring circus, a traveling city of canvas that would move every day, set up the big top, perform two shows, tear down the big top, and move on to the next town. And it kept moving that way until the Ringling Brothers Circus kept moving that way until the mid 20th century. In 1956, they performed their last shows under canvas for Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. By that time, the ability to find a circus lot big enough for all of those tents was very hard. The costs of moving everything were just astronomical. And there were large venues, arenas, and coliseums that they could stage the show in. So their move was made in 1956, and then Irvin Feld bought Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey in 1967 and really innovated how they produced the spectacles to put on the greatest show on earth. And that's the circus that so many of us remember in arenas, were these marvelous, bedazzled, sparkling shows filled with extraordinary talents.
We're talking circus with Jennifer Lemmer Posey. What circus shows can visitors see in Sarasota, and are they seasonal?
Hmm. So circus is part of Sarasota year round. It came here in 1927 because John Ringling had brought his winter home here and decided that in order to develop the region, he would bring the circus community in the winter quarters, and that became one of the earliest tourist attractions in the state of Florida. So here in Sarasota, there is a wealth of circus community, many people who are actively performing. Many little shows launch from this region, along with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. Feld Entertainment, who now produces that show, is based nearby in Ellenton. So we have circus kind of in the background all the time here in Sarasota, but you can catch performances a lot of the year. Right now, in the museum's theater, we have a summer circus performance going on in collaboration with the local group, the Circus Arts Conservatory. And come winter time in February and March, that same group will have a show under a big top, a one ring circus in the style of P.T. Barnum and all of those amazing talents in their big top. At that time of the year, there's probably three or four other circuses that will come through the region. And then in the springtime and in the fall, we have Sailor Circus, which is a youth circus that's based here. It started out of our Sarasota High School and has now grown and is under the auspices of Circus Arts Conservatory to teach a new generation how to perform. And they put on shows that are extraordinary. So we like to say you can always find circus here in Sarasota.
What and where is the Tibbles Learning Center, and how did it get its name?
So it's a layered question. The Tibbles Learning Center is part of the Circus Museum here. It's in Sarasota, Florida. We are on the estate of John and Mabel Ringling. So the official title of our museum complex is the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art. And the museum was founded by John Ringling, the youngest of the Circus brothers. And he really wanted to leave a legacy on top of the circus business by creating this museum of art. So we have this extraordinary collection of paintings by Baroque and Renaissance masters. We have Rubens paintings, many others in our galleries. That was what John envisioned as his legacy. He also built a gorgeous home here on the bayfront in Sarasota. Cottazon, or House of John, is a testament to the life that he had with his wife Mabel here in Sarasota. The grounds of the museum have a rose garden. All of these beautiful sights to see. That the Cottazon is on the screen right now. It's extraordinary, extraordinary mansion. The Circus Museum was not part of John Ringling's vision for this complex. He had brought the winter quarters to Sarasota, so he brought circus to the town, but he didn't bring it to this property. That happened in 1948 when the first director of the museum, Chick Austin, decided that to tell the whole circus story, he really needed to to tell the whole Ringling story, he really needed to represent the circus on the grounds. And our circus museum has grown over the years through the donations of performers and others. But starting in 2000, the museum entered into a relationship with Howard Tibbles, who had no direct uh, ties to the circus, but he had fallen in love with the circus, with the traveling circus as a child. And he began making a miniature circus when he was 17 years old. And he wanted to find the right home for that circus and for his other circus collections, posters, photographs, all kinds of wonderful material that document the history of the circus. And so he worked with the museum to create the Tibbles Learning Center, which is now the building that houses the Howard Brothers Circus model, as well as many of our circus collections. And so that's kind of the start of how it all got here.
Miniatures must be one of your prized possessions. Tell us about it and whether there's anything like it anywhere else.
Well, in true circus fashion, I'm going to say there's nothing like it anywhere else. There, it is really an extraordinary creation and a testament to how magical the circus has been for people, throughout its existence. So to give some, it's hard to begin with the model circus because the Howard Brothers Circus model covers over 3,800 square feet of tabletop here at the museum. I like to tell people that's bigger than my house. It's a 3/4 inch scale replica of what the American circus, specifically Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, looked like in the 1920s and 1930s when it was at its very largest, traveling under canvas and by rail. We see a picture of Howard Tibbles here installing the model circus here at the Ringling. Howard did all of the research he needed to build this um, as a perfect replica of the circus lot. So everything is built to perfect scale. The wagon that he was unloading in the image you just shared, it was built to house all of the things that that very same wagon would have housed for the circus to travel. When it arrived here, the model was completely packed up in the wagons, and the wagons were placed on the railroad cars. And Howard and a small team of volunteers slowly unpacked one wagon at a time. Just like the circus, they set up the cookhouse tent first, installed all of the tables, placed little tiny food on every plate, and have those filled with people eating. Um, and then the rest of the circus day plays out from there. You see behind the scenes the performers getting ready for the show. On the midway, you see the people standing outside of the sideshow tent and the concession stand selling tickets and popcorn and balloons. And then you can walk around the model and see how visitors would have entered through the menagerie tent in the early 20th century, because that was a big feature. The sideshow was its own separate ticket, but the menagerie tent was kind of the educational aspect of the circus. And so people bought their ticket to see the show, walked through the menagerie, got to see animals from all over the world, learn all kinds of things that they hadn't had a chance to encounter before, and then took their seats in a big top that in that era, in the 1920s and 30s, could seat up to 13,000 people for one show. This amazing giant arena with three rings, two stages, things happening above you, things happening in front of you, and a whole world of people all around. And that was just one of 8 tents that were there on the circus lot and that are represented in the model. We like to share with people the model, again, 3,800 square feet of model circus that comprised of over 45,000 individual objects, each person, each wagon, and that doesn't even break down the individual parts to those complicated pieces. But it shows the whole of Circus Day, and it gives a sense of the complexity of what was happening because the circus was coming into town, setting up everything early in the morning, putting on a 2 o'clock show that would run 2 to 3 hours because they had music concerts and performances in the rings and all of these other sights to see. So 2 o'clock matinee, then they would have a break for dinner time and people to be out on the midway, then a 7 o'clock evening show. And when you walked out of the big top after that 7 o'clock show, all of the rest of the circus lot was broken down and moving on to another town. So all of those logistics and all of the complexity can be seen in the model as Howard built it.
Jane, is it fair to say any part of the models can be picked up, and does that include wagons, costumes, and props?
Well, yes and no. It can. Nothing is fixed. to the tabletop. The tents are fixed because they have to be because they're tensioned, so you couldn't just pick that up, and also they're really big. Um, but the model itself is actually displayed in a glass chamber that is slightly pressurized. So you can't touch anything in the model because it's all behind glass. And that environment that it's in with the higher pressure was created that way so that it doesn't attract dust. Nothing can get into that space. It instead is kind of forced out by the higher pressure air if there were a way for it to get in. So the model is very well protected, but if that glass wasn't there, anything could be moved around. Nothing is fixed. Even the food on the plates on the tables is right where it needs to be.
When I think of the circus, Jen, I think about circus animals, especially trained elephants. Are animals depicted among your miniatures too?
Absolutely. Yes, they're part of the circus history. Um, I wish I had a count for you on exactly how many elephants are on the model table, but throughout the model, you can see elephants. There are elephants in the train yard being unloaded from the train. There are elephants that are parading across what we call the backyard of the circus. That's the area that is the backside of the big top. Those are costumed, getting ready to go in for their performance. Then, as you move your way around the menagerie tent, there's a whole lineup of elephants, which shows how people visiting the circus in the early 20th century would have had a chance to walk right up to an elephant and meet it, interact with an animal right there next to them. And then trying to think if there's actually an elephant. I don't think any elephants have entered the big top yet for the performance. There are all these other things that are happening in the miniature, but there are definitely a lot of elephants. There are tigers. There are lots of performing dogs, horses, and anything else you could imagine seeing on the circus lot.
How long should a visitor allow to truly experience the miniature circus?
Ah, well, if we're just saying the miniature circus, it usually takes people, you can zip around it in just a few minutes if you don't want to spend a lot of time looking closely. But in my experience, most people spend at least 20 minutes just in the model gallery. And that is one small part of the experiences that you can have, not only in the circus museum galleries, but across the whole complex.
Is it primarily for kids, the miniatures, or is it for everybody?
Children of all ages, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah, I children do enjoy the model, which is always interesting to me because it's very different. What it depicts is very different than the world that they know today. I think that's what's mesmerizing for children. It also the tabletop is low enough that young children get a really good view, but it truly does attract and awe visitors of all ages. I routinely walk through that space and watch how many people are pointing, to this thing or that on the table, trying to get the attention of the people they're with. It's such a rich amount of material and stories playing out there that I really feel like all of our visitors enjoy it.
Okay, looking at this picture on the screen now,
Yeah.
everything has to be done by hand.
Yes.
All
Well,
these
so
ropes, strings, whatever it is, all hand done.
in both the miniature and the real circus, yes. I was just recalling to someone how I watched Howard Tibbles install the tents on the circus, and in this image, you kind of can make out the tent stakes that the ropes are tied off to, and every one of those he had to drill into the tabletop, and then once the stakes were there and the canvas was spread and the little poles were pulled up, Howard patiently tied every one of those off to the stakes and then coiled the ropes carefully around them just like they would have on the circus lot.
And the detail is amazing. I mean, if you look at this picture, which is still on the screen, there's a dog back here in front of the red wagon.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is the I think that's one reason people can spend so much time in the model gallery is that if once you realize that it's worth looking closely, you start to see every little detail. And there are I always feel a little badly telling people this. There are details you can't see. If you could reach past the glass and take the top off of one of the ticket wagons that's on the midway, there are these wonderful ticket wagons, which is where the people would have lined up to get into the show. Howard built out the inside of those wagons as well, and so inside the ticket wagons are small desks, just like they would have used to work at, and drawers. And you can open the drawers, and inside the drawers are tiny cash bills and tickets. So every detail is there.
Do you recommend that guests experience the timeline of the circus in America and your newest exhibit, The Greatest Show on Earth Gallery?
Absolutely. Yes, I do. I love that behind you right now is the marquee entrance for the Greatest Show on Earth Gallery. That sign, the Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey sign, was a gift to us from Feld Entertainment and was last used in 2016 on one of their traveling shows. The timeline, which actually leads right to the Greatest Show on Earth Gallery, it does this wonderful job of showing us how circus has changed over the years, growing in size from one ring to three, traveling by rail, all of these different ways that the circus has changed and evolved in relation to how the country has changed and evolved. And we have historic moments in American history paralleling this circus timeline. And then all the way through it, we have objects like a tiny little locket that has photos of Tom Thumb, or a carved piece from one of the circus wagons, posters, costume pieces. So the timeline really kind of gives a sense of what the circus has been here for, over 100 years. And then the Greatest Show on Earth Gallery shows what the circus has been these last 50 years. And it's really about the technologies and the performers. So you get a lot of vivid imagery. There's a lot of film. There is this wonderful gallery that incorporates film and costumes where people can watch and see acrobats and aerialists and clowns perform, and then really appreciate the kind of wardrobe and craftsmanship that goes into staging the shows. So it's got a really rich range of experiences for families and for anyone who loves the circus.
We're talking Sarasota Circus with Jennifer Lemmer-Posey. How many objects are cataloged in the circus collections and where are they stored?
So all of our collections are stored in, well, some are in the galleries, something like wagons or railroad car, these larger things live in the galleries, and everything else is stored in collection spaces, vaults that are across the museum grounds. We have, I don't even know the exact number of objects that we have in the collection. We have over 8,000 circus posters here. We have more than 15,000 cataloged individual pieces that represent wardrobe. Sometimes that's a pair of stockings, sometimes it's a full clown costume. So when I say 15,000, that sounds like a lot, but not all of them are huge. We have over 30 wagons. We have the miniature circus, as we just discussed. We have all kinds of fun props that have been used over time. We have a railroad car. We have just these monumental, the big and small. It's really nice. We go from a railroad car down to the model circus, or a ring that was worn by a giant. So we have all kinds of things.
Travel Witch Radio, we love trains, trolleys, streetcars, subways, monorails, funiculars, anything on tracks. So tell us about the full-size Pullman coach that was once the personal railroad car of John Ringling.
Yeah, so the Wisconsin railroad car was built by the Pullman Company and delivered to John Ringling in 1905. He was the first of the brothers to buy his own private railroad car. This was in part because John did the work that was called the advance. So he would go out ahead of the circus and secure contracts for lots, make sure that things were lined up to have the supplies and resources they needed and the advertising. So he did a lot of independent travel and used the Wisconsin to do that work. The car itself is extraordinary. A 1905 Pullman car. It had a wood siding, and beautiful finished wood interiors with inlay and gilding. This railroad car, John used it until 1916, and then he bought a metal-sided car, to be able to travel. The safety laws had changed, and the wooden-sided cars were not as popular. So he did what was considered an upgrade at that time. And so the Wisconsin, the railroad car that we have, was actually sold to a railroad line, was used for a while by their executives, and eventually was parked on a spur line in North Carolina, where it was used as kind of a cabin for railroad executives to stay in. While it was there, they painted all the interiors white, which sounds terrible when you see the beautiful inlaid wood that is in this car. But by doing so, they actually preserved everything because it was protected by this layer of paint. It came here to the Ringling in 2007 and has undergone a full restoration, so it looks just like it looked like when John and Mabel traveled, and there is the staterooms. John and Mabel each had their own. They have a wonderful bathtub that they could use when they were parked somewhere. So you get a full sense of kind of the luxury of the life that they could lead while traveling across the country.
Does the circus still travel by train, and how often?
So, no, which this is honestly the first time that I've gotten to say no to that. The Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus up until 2017 was still using trains to travel, but with the new show that just launched this past fall, they've changed their methods and they are now traveling mostly by truck. And the performers then are traveling, I believe, by air. So their routes are very different than they used to be. Um, yeah, it's a different time. The train is no longer the most economic way of transporting a show. I think that trucks are just much more efficient for them, and they have more control over it too. With trains, you're at the mercy of the lines themselves and, how timing is going. So that's one thing that has changed really significantly.
So if they travel by air, are the elephants allowed to eat peanuts on the plane?
Well, I would hope they would be, but, the Ringling Show doesn't have animals performing with them anymore, so,
I heard that.
yeah, so I don't know, I'm also really wary. I don't know how you travel an elephant by plane. I've talked to people who have traveled with elephants on, like, sea voyages, and that's complicated enough.
Oh, sure it is. Did you happen to see the Seinfeld episode about the circus?
I bet that I did, but it must have been before I worked here. No, I don't remember
Okay,
it.
I'll give you a hint. Kramer had a kidney stone that he was passing at the circus, and all the animals started bellowing when he was screaming.
That's funny.
It was a
Yeah.
good episode. Okay, I love the human cannonball act. So I'd like to hear about the super repeating cannon used by Bruno Zucchini. I know there's a
Zucchini.
short video as well as an actual costume worn by a human cannonball.
Yes, absolutely. The circus is a place where people do amazing and sometimes unfathomable things, right? Who ever dreamed that it would be a great idea to be shot out of a cannon? But the Zucchini family, multiple generations performed that act, and so we do have one of their repeating cannons. It was meant to launch a person and then another person across the sky. It's a large silver truck with the cannon built onto the back, and it travels with the cannon barrel low, and then it can be lifted up for performance. So it's been here at the museum longer than I have, and is among our many treasures. And we do have the costume, a full leather costume that was worn by one of the Zucchini performers in that act.
Okay, what is the banner line and why is it significant?
Mm. So, among the wagons that we have here in our collections are wagons that were part of the sideshow banner line for Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey in the 40s and 50s. And they're interesting logistically because they are the red box wagons that inside they could carry all kinds of equipment. On the sides of them are mounted these frames that fold up. And when you unfold the frames, you see the images of some of the human curiosities who were part of the sideshow performance that was staged in that tent separate from the big top on the midway. And sideshow and that display of people because of human difference is one of the historic aspects of circus. It's something that we don't see so much. There are independently run sideshows still today, but they aren't incorporated into the circus any longer. It's just not part of their model. But these wagons are just a really interesting reminder and a really clever way to logistically travel signage so that you could set it up really quickly and be ready for the show.
Okay, I'd like to just give our viewers a taste of what's going on around the circus. So, what's going on in Sarasota? Is it true the area draws 3 million guests a year, covers 725 square miles, has 35 miles of Gulf of Mexico coastline, and 6 barrier islands?
That is all true. It is a beautiful region. The circus people always, when they start talking about John Ringling and Sarasota and the beautiful beaches and all of the wonderful things here. I always say thank you, John Ringling, for bringing the circus here because it's like paradise.
Well, the whole area is called Florida's Cultural Coast because of the museums, art galleries, performing arts centers, and of course the circus. Isn't it also called the circus capital of the world?
I call it that, yes. Um, there there are a few cities that like to debate that. The circus arts are strong in Montreal and several other places, but truly, Sarasota is also known as the epicenter of the American circus because of that winter quarters connection. So many circus performers and families moved to this area and settled here. They raised their families here and they've started their own circuses, launched their own performance careers out of this area. And now, with the Circus Arts Conservatory and the museum, we see people coming back in to work with the circus performers in the area. So it really is Circus City.
Every time you mention the word circus, I think of Las Vegas and Circus Casino. No connection, though, right?
Well, Circus Casino was a place that employed circus performers. So if you were talking to somebody who was part of the circus community here, I bet within 3 degrees, they could probably make a connection to how their family, performed or knew someone who performed at Circus. It's a small world when you get down to it.
Then tell us about the Circus Ring of Fame, the Circus Arts Conservatory, and the Ringling, of course.
Yeah. So the Circus Ring of Fame, it was founded in 1988. It's here on one of our barrier islands in a district that's known as St. Armand's Circle. St. Armand's Circle was a retail area that was established actually by John Ringling and some of his business partners to kind of help promote the lifestyle of Sarasota. And so at its heart, it is a traffic circle, and the park that's in the center is ringed by plaques that honor some of the greatest performers in circus history. And every February, there is an induction ceremony, and a few more names are added to that list, and a few more plaques are added to the circle. So it's a really lovely place to see, how long and how deep the history of circus is here in Sarasota. I think you asked about the Circus Arts Conservatory also.
Yes.
That is a group that really actually started initially here at the Ringling Museum from the passions of a number of circus people, most specifically Dolly Jacobs and her now husband Pedro Reyes. They founded a national circus school and then began performing. And their very first performances were here at the Ringling Museum in our circus galleries. And they really have grown what was a very small little program of artists who were dedicated to the traditional circus arts. And now they are this innovative group that is teaching circus arts to the next generation through Sailor Circus, is doing humor therapy and other kinds of social outreach to help use the circus arts to improve people's lives. And on top of all of that, they're putting on professional shows. Here at the Ringling in their own circus tent, and they're currently performing in the Berkshires too. So they're an extraordinary evidence of the liveliness of circus arts here in Sarasota. And then the Ringling Museum you asked me about, which
Yes.
obviously that's of the whole list, my very favorite. The Ringling Museum, as I mentioned earlier, we are an estate that actually contains multiple types of collections. So we have the historic home Cadazan that's in the image that's up right now. That was one of the homes of John and Mabel Ringling. It's right on Sarasota Bay. It was built on this property before the bigger building that is here, the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art. That was really John's gift to the people of Florida. He built this extraordinary art museum and grew a collection in just a very short amount of time of paintings by Baroque, Renaissance artists and more. And then that has been built on throughout the years by directors. We also have an extraordinary Asian art collection. We have a very good collection of contemporary art and photography, deck arts and glass. So it's got a really wide ranging, excellent collection of artwork. We have a performing theater, the historic Oslo Theater, where currently we have a circus show, but we bring again contemporary performance artists of all types into that space. We have a 66-acre estate that it has a rose garden and many other beautiful banyan trees. And then we have two buildings that house all of our circus collections. So there's um, several days worth of things to see here at the Ringling.
Okay. In passing, let's just mention a couple of other things before we close it up. The
Yeah.
murals of the Rosemary District, the Avenue of Art sidewalk paintings in the Byrne Court Historic District, and history in Sarasota County, Old Florida in Englewood and Venice, New Florida, personified by the parks and waterways in Northport. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We are, as you mentioned earlier, it's a cultural coast, and the murals and the art, the public art projects are really strong in the region, and they almost always tie back to the history. So we see circus play out, we see baseball, we see all of the nature coast, the alligators and the egrets and herons. We have all of these things are really reflected in the public art that you can find in those districts you mentioned.
And since you mentioned baseball, spring training in Northport, home of the Atlanta Braves, for 6 weeks between Valentine's Day and April 1st. A more traditional spring training complex is occupied by the Baltimore Orioles in downtown Sarasota. It's a beautiful place. I've been to both ballparks. Really fun. Spring training is the
Yeah.
best time of the year.
Yeah. Well, it brings all kinds of people into the area to see it. It's also it's always amazing to me how much the teams give back to our area too. They do a lot to support local youth athletics. So, yeah, the marriage between spring training and Sarasota has a long history.
Is it true that an aquarium is coming next year? We hear the Mate Marine Lab and Aquarium will open a state-of-the-art facility in Sarasota that contains 1 million gallons of water and includes sharks, coral reef, manatees, sea turtles, otters, and a myriad of other creatures. You know about
You are,
that, or is
I,
that
I
film?
know a little bit about it. So it's the Moat Marine Aquarium, and the Moat has been here. I don't know what year it was founded, but it's been here in the Sarasota area for a very long time. The new facility is being built out near I-75, our interstate, where the original facility is out on one of the barrier islands. So the original facility will maintain as a research area. They do a lot of work on marine research and some of the red tide problems that we've seen. So they do important work there. The new attraction, which you mentioned, with all of this wonderful state of the art displays of marine life, as I understand, is supposed to open later this year, early next year. I don't know what schedule they're on exactly, but I am sure from what I've seen rising up out there at the construction site, it's going to be extraordinary.
Okay, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to add? Probably a
Ah,
lot.
well, I could go on for hours, but you've asked a good wide ranging set of questions. I think, just that the Ringling Complex is such a rich and unique place, and the circus history part is certainly my favorite. But I feel like people come to this museum and always walk away kind of amazed by what a great experience they had, no matter what their expectations were.
How do Travel Witch Radio viewers learn more about the circus and about Sarasota County?
Well, I think the best place to learn is at ringling.org. That's our website. That'll give you links to visiting the museum, also some information on circus history in the region, definitely, and links to the local attractions and partners.
Our guest today on Travel Itch Radio has been Jennifer Lemmer-Posey, Tibble's Curator of Circus in Sarasota, Florida. Thank you so much for visiting with us.
Thanks, Dan.
And this is the 50th anniversary of the home run that broke Babe Ruth's record for Hank Aaron. Now that the second half of the season has started, this is your chance to share the excitement with my new biography, Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Featuring a foreword by Dusty Baker, this 265-page hardcover explores Aaron's contributions not only as a home run hitter on and off the field, as an athlete and an advocate for civil rights. That's Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Get it today on Amazon.com. And that's it for this edition of Travel Witch Radio. Next week, same time, same place, we'll find out about the International Underground Railroad Month with Maya Davis. Now, this is Dan Schlossberg saying thank you for your time this time. Until next time, good night and stay safe.